Hey everyone, Fred here. In this video, I'm going to explain the exact system I've used to help hundreds of people fix their knee pain. From CrossFitters to weightlifters to powerlifters to footballers to rugby players, you name it. Now, this took me over 3 hours to film, so this is a complete system. It's not some random stretches, not some random exercises that are going to get you halfway there. This is going to take you from being very confused, in a lot of pain, not being able to do much, back to doing that sport or activity you love doing, stronger, more mobile, more confident, and at a higher level of performance compared to before you were injured. Welcome to the knee pain system. So this is going to be your complete guide to fixing your knee pain and getting back to that sport or activity you love doing. Just to preface this before we start, this is not for someone who just wants to get back to doing some very basic daily activities. This is for someone that wants to get back to doing a sport or an activity at a fairly high level. You're fairly into your sport. Maybe you go to the gym 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, or you play a sport fairly regularly. This is not for someone who just wants a quick fix, and this is for someone who actually wants a long-term solution to their chronic knee pain. So here's what we're going to cover. Foundations. So we're going to talk about why your knee actually hurts, the key reasons behind that, because once you understand that, it puts everything else into perspective and we can have a very clear plan of attack about how to fix your knee pain. Then we're going to talk about why diagnosis doesn't matter for chronic knee pain and why you might have been misled previously about diagnosis. What your pain actually means in terms of rehab, the 0 to 3 out of 10 rule, so how much pain is safe during rehab, systems versus emotions, so following a system versus following how you feel, and combining these two things, and then the 6 factors that affect knee pain: sleep, nutrition, your beliefs around injuries and pain, your strength, your mobility, and your speed. Then we're going to go into the system itself. So it's a 5-phase knee rehab framework. So you will complete phase 1, you will then complete phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, and then you will return to that sport or activity. Between each phases, there'll be objective testing, so you can make sure you're safe enough, you're strong enough, you're mobile enough, you're confident enough to progress to the next phase. So within this, there'll be movement testing, strength testing, and pain plus tissue response. So how you're responding to the testing and if you have a low enough pain level to progress. Of course, this will identify when you're ready to progress by ticking off these boxes. There is no guesswork involved here. There's a very clear framework. And this will also give you guidance about how long to stay in each phase for. Because if you don't meet the criteria to pass phase 1, for example, then you need to stay there for longer until you meet the criteria, and then you're safe to progress. And then the final thing is the application of this system. So I'm going to talk you through the complete framework from phase 1 all the way through to phase 5. So I'm going to walk you through that in terms of exercises, the amount of days you'll be training per week, the frequency of how many times you'll be doing certain things, daily mobility, strength progressions, plyometrics, which is jumping, bounding, running, changing direction, retesting between phases, as I mentioned previously. And then for a phase 5, return to sport, I'm going to use football as the example. So this will explain how you transfer from rehab back to very sport-specific drills, which will allow you to hit the ground running when you get back to football as the example, or any other sport for that matter. And then this also links into a return to sport criteria. So again, making sure that you're confident enough, strong enough, mobile enough, and you have the correct conditioning to hit the ground running when you get back to sport. And then I will also give you some rough time frames about how long typically knee pain takes to fix and how long clients typically work with me for. So let's jump into it. So welcome to the system. This document is going to walk you through the complete framework I use to help athletes fix chronic knee pain from understanding pain to restoring movement, rebuilding strength and power, and being at a high level of performance than you previously were pre-injury. This isn't some random stretches or exercises. It's actually a structured, objective five-phase progression, designed for active people who want to return to training and sport safely and confidently. So before we get into it, you can make a copy if you click here, and then you'll be able to save a copy without editing it. So you'll have a full copy of this document that you can use whenever is needed. A few key important principles before we start. 3 important principles that are going to be really useful for you. Pain does not equal damage. So pain is incredibly complex, and it's not purely due to structural damage at the knee. That's an important thing to consider when going through an effective knee rehab process. The next thing is that knee pain or knee rehab is multifactorial. So almost nothing improves by fixing one thing. Knee pain changes when you improve all the buckets. And these buckets are mobility, strength, control, plyometrics, conditioning, sleep, nutrition, and your beliefs around pain. This system works because it addresses every component that is required to get you back to training and playing sport. So there's plenty of examples here in everyday life. Usually when we're trying to fix something, and typically when that thing is fairly complex, in business and relationships, whatever it is, it's rarely by fixing one thing. It's usually by having a broader approach, as we're doing with this system. So when you see all these kind of 30-second to 3-minute videos on YouTube with 2 exercises to fix your knee pain, very rarely are they going to do a lot, because usually they're only focusing on one of these buckets. The next thing is that progress must be objective. So you move forward when you meet the criteria, not when you feel ready. Not when pain magically disappears, and not based on your emotions. Follow the testing standards and the system will guide your progress. This is a very simple point, but a lot of people fail to understand this in fixing their knee pain. Emotions are a normal part of rehab, and obviously rehab can be a very frustrating process. But the thing you must not do when going through this document is react emotionally to your pain or how you're getting on with rehab in terms of strength, mobility, etc. You need to objectively make sure that you meet the criteria, tick it off, and then progress. You need to be almost quite stoic with this. Otherwise, you will just end up going around in a pain cycle. So, to start with, why you have knee pain. The first reason, and probably one of the most important and most obvious and overlooked, is poor graded exposure in that sport or activity that typically cause the knee pain in the first place. Now, this is just a posh way of saying doing too much too soon. So I've got this nice little graph here to show you. We've got load on this axis, and then we've got performance up here. And then we have this red line here, which obviously represents load. So then we have these 3 different boxes. We have undertraining, we have optimal load, and then we have excessive load. So to break this down simply, when you do too much too soon, you're in this zone over here. You're overreaching, you're overtraining, and your knee and your body can't handle the load you're placing upon it. Not generally because it's not strong or mobile enough, or it doesn't have the potential to get there, but because right at that moment you've done too much too soon. So you can always increase your load tolerance, but you've just increased the volume of the activity too quickly, usually over the space of a few weeks. So the first thing is understanding that, and that will give you some clues as to how you can reduce your knee pain quite quickly with that quick win, which is decreasing that painful sport activity, decreasing the amount you're doing it. The next thing that is affecting why you have knee pain is the injured joint, so your knee, in terms of strength, mobility, speed, and confidence. So at the knee, we've got 3 movements. We have knee extension, which is straightening the knee. We have knee flexion, which is bending the knee. And we have tibial rotation, which is a one that people miss out. Tibial rotation is your shin bone and your shin bone can internally rotate, as shown here, and it can externally rotate. And this will naturally happen in a healthy knee when you bend your knee and you change direction. So in a lot of people with knee pain, either internal rotation will be blocked up on one side compared to your uninjured side, and the same thing with external rotation. So we've got poor grade exposure, which is doing too much too soon, the injured joint, which is your knee, and then we have the kinetic chain. So the kinetic chain is the rest of the body and how that ties into how the knee functions. So again, related to strength, mobility, speed, and confidence. To start with, we have the hip, which is obviously above the knee, and we have all these movements at the hip that can affect your knee pain. So hip flexion, hip extension, internal rotation, external rotation, abduction, and adduction. And I've got a nice little diagram here to explain those movements. So hip flexion is this movement here. So it is, think of it like a high knee movement. It's decreasing the angle between your femur and your torso. So these two things here. Extension is then the opposite movement. So with a straight leg, you'll bring your leg out behind your body. Then we have abduction and adduction. Abduction is taking a straight leg away from your body, and adduction is taking it across or towards your midline. Then internal rotation is internally rotating the femur, and then external rotation is externally rotating the femur. And if you don't know, the femur is your thigh bone. So it's the bone up here that sits between your knee and then into the hip socket. Then we also have the ankle and foot. So we have these movements that can affect your knee pain: dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, pronation, and supination. So dorsiflexion is pointing up like this, and plantar flexion is pointing down like that. So this is the whole foot moving. Then with pronation and supination, all this is, I haven't got a picture of it because it's a bit more complex to explain, is essentially just the opening and closing of the arches in your foot. So pronation is closing the arch, so closing midfoot, and supination is opening it without the rest of your foot moving. So a lot of people will mistake pronation and supination for inversion and eversion. And inversion and eversion is the whole foot chunking in and out, whereas pronation and supination is just the midfoot moving. Then we also have the spine and the rib cage, which is obviously higher up the body, but still affects how the lower body functions and can affect your knee pain. So we have the spine and the rib cage. We have flexion, extension, rotation, side flexion, and then in the rib cage, we have breathing mechanics, compression and expansion. So to start with the spine can rotate, it can flex, so bend forward, and extend, bend backwards, and then it can laterally flex, so it can bend to the side. Then we have compression and expansion. So as you inhale, your chest expands, and then as you exhale, your chest compresses and contracts, and your diaphragm relaxes. So they're all the physical things, essentially. Poor grade exposure, injured joint, and then the kinetic chain, which is again the hip, the foot and ankle, and the spine and rib cage. Then we have some other things that could be causing your knee pain or affecting your knee pain. Previous injuries. So according to all the good research, they've done multiple systematic reviews across loads of sports. If you have a previous injury, you are 2 to 4 times increased risk of re-injury after a previous knee injury. So significantly more. And then you have twice the risk of developing any lower body injury after a previous lower body injury. So pretty high. So if you've had previous knee injuries or previous hip injuries or previous ankle or foot injuries, that could be the reason you are developing knee pain or have a knee injury. And obviously, if you've injured the joint / tissue before, that area is going to be weaker, you're going to move differently, and you're going to be less confident loading it. For example, if you've had a foot and ankle injury on your left-hand side, and then you've had hip pain or hip injury on your left-hand side, the likelihood that you're going to have a knee injury on your left-hand side is obviously much higher, because now you're more weak, you're less confident loading that left-hand side, and therefore your body is going to compensate in movement patterns. The next thing is poor sleep. Now, a lot of people underrate how important sleep is for effective injury rehab with your knee, but also preventing injuries. So again, all the research points to the fact that less than 7 hours of sleep a night increases your injury risk between 1.7 to 2 times. And this applies across multiple sports. As well as this, sleep quality also matters as much as sleep quantity. So again, athletes reporting poor sleep quality have 40% higher injury risks. The reasons for this, you probably all know, but poor sleep slows tissue repair, sleep drives collagen synthesis, hormone regulation, immune function, neural recovery, and inflammation. When sleep duration plus quality drops, your tendons become more reactive, you experience more pain, just generally day to day, in your whole body, particularly your knee. If you have knee pain, your muscle recovery is slower, your load tolerance decreases, and your coordination decreases. So make sure you are sleeping at least 7 to 9 hours a night, and it's good quality sleep. The next thing that could be causing your knee pain, linked to it, is poor nutrition. To start with, underfueling. This increases injury risk by between 2 to 4 times because it decreases bone density, decreases tendon collagen synthesis, increases fatigue and technical errors, and increases cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is obviously going to impair you in a lot of ways, not just with your rehab. Also, low protein intake, so protein under 1.6 grams per kilo per day, linked to a higher soft tissue injury rate. Athletes consuming 1.8 to 2 grams per kilo per day show significantly lower injury incidence. And then a few other things, low carb intake, poor carb fueling increases injury risk by 15 to 30%, and athletes should be consuming between 3 to 7 grams per kilo per day. Obviously, this massively ranges on the sport and the activity levels. Dehydration equals 1.5 to 2 times higher injury risk. And some quick fixes here are obviously have a water bottle with you wherever you go and take some electrolytes. Low vitamin D, that's also a risk, so it increases stress fractures plus muscle injury risk. And this is 3 to 4 times higher in athletes with a deficiency, a risk of injury there. So the next thing that can affect your knee pain that might have caused your knee pain is negative beliefs and experiences, particularly with previous physios, coaches, or therapists. And there's a few different reasons for this, but the main one is something that's called overgeneralization bias. So someone takes one or few negative experiences and assumes all similar experiences will be the same. An example of this in my case was me buying business mentorships online. So the first business mentorship I bought was incredibly overpriced, and it was a bit shit. It was a bit rubbish, being completely honest. And so this caused an overgeneralization bias with me, because then I thought all other business mentorships online must be rubbish and they must be a scam. But I managed to push past this, and my second one that I bought was game-changing for myself and the business. So that's a huge one. The next thing is confirmation bias. You selectively pay attention to negative stories and ignore successful rehab stories. So you seek evidence that matches your negative belief or beliefs. The next one is just biologically programmed in humans, which is negativity bias. As humans, we give more weight to negative experiences than positive ones. Example, you're driving home from work, a driver cuts you up once, they pull out in front of you or something, and this outweighs you having an amazing day, or which was an amazing day. Another example, one bad physio outweighs 5 good ones. You're going to remember the one bad one, not the 5 good ones. And we have this bias because this is how we have evolved to survive. It's why sometimes when you get a pain in your side, you think, oh, am I going to die? You think of the worst consequence straight away. The next thing is something called learned helplessness. So after repeated failed attempts, the person starts believing, nothing works, my body's broken, nobody can help me. And this obviously affects your motivation, consistency, pain perception, and the outcome of your knee rehab. And the final one, which is again very important, sunken cost fallacy. which is you've spent money, time, and effort before on previous bits for knee rehab, and none of it worked. And so now you emotionally resist trying again because you don't want to waste money and you don't want to get your hopes up again. So this covers everything in this section. Probably one of the most important sections of this whole document, why you have knee pain. So again, going through all this very quickly, it's loads of different things. It's not one thing. You need to make sure that you're attacking pretty much all of these areas to help your knee pain, which is what we'll get onto later on in the document. So the next thing we're going to talk about is what pain actually means. Pain is incredibly complex. So multiple physical and social factors affect it. And it's not the only thing you should be measuring in rehab. And this is because pain is not always predictable. And sometimes people actually finish rehab, they're still in pain, but they've still won as such. They've still completed rehab effectively. And this is because sometimes people can still have a tiny bit of pain at the end of rehab, but they'll be back to that sport or activity, which was actually the end goal. See, the problem is when you've been to see physios, coaches, or therapists in the past, pain is put on a pedestal. And you might have thought, or you might have convinced yourself, that becoming pain-free is the end goal. But actually, the only reason you went to see a physio in the first place is because pain was preventing you doing that sport or activity you love. So really, the end goal was actually completing that sport or activity again. Just think about that for a minute. So pain is an important metric to measure throughout rehab, but it shouldn't be the end goal and it shouldn't be put on a pedestal. This is a very interesting diagram to demonstrate how complex pain is. So you've got pain in the middle and you have all of these different factors here, color-coded, that affect it. So you can have a quick scan through these. Individual factors, psychological factors, biomechanical factors, nociceptive detection and processing, tissue injury or pathology, behavioral and lifestyle, contextual factors, and social/work factors. So again, this quite clearly explains and should put the idea into your head that if someone is talking about knee pain and they give you a very simple explanation and they only give you one reason as to why you have knee pain, they're wrong. So the 0 to 3 out of 10 rule. How much pain counts as safe? What counts as too much? How to modify exercises without stopping training. So this is the pain score scale. You might have seen this before. On this end, 0, which is no pain, and on this end, 10, which is the worst pain imaginable. During rehab, generally speaking, as long as you stay within that 0 to 3 out of 10 pain score range, this is okay. Because a little bit of pain is actually almost retraining your brain to deal with it and push past it. Any more than a 3 is usually not good because that can be causing potentially more damage to the tissues or just inhibiting you doing effective movement. And again, this massively depends on what stage of rehab you're at. So usually early on, a bit more pain is okay. And then as you progress from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4 to phase 5, we will decrease this number. Types of knee pain. Does diagnosis matter? So this is probably one of the most misunderstood things around knee pain. Diagnosis is a trap. So a lot of people with knee pain are overdiagnosed, which means they have a poor treatment planning. There's no system or framework to follow. This creates negative thinking, and again, getting a diagnosis or the fact that you need to get a diagnosis is a very common belief. Don't be a sheep. Don't follow what everyone else is doing. The reason diagnosis doesn't matter in 99.9% of cases of people with chronic knee pain is because in general, the programs are very, very similar. You're looking at the individual. You're not looking at the diagnosis. And the individual is going to have issues in all those things I mentioned potentially causing knee pain. So physical factors as well as lifestyle factors, and then obviously specific test results from testing them physically. And so to diagnose someone is not helping them in that regard. Another reason it's not helping is because when you get a diagnosis, you will go onto Google or Chat GPT and you will look up your diagnosis and it will provide you with, the worst possible outcomes. It will get you stressed and it will give you some random exercises that don't actually fix the issue. You will then get frustrated because you think that was the solution. It's not working, and then you get disheartened. So that's really, really important. The only caveat to that is acute traumatic injuries like ACL tears, MCL sprains. They do follow a longer timeline due to tissue healing, but the same 5-phase system still applies. So I will still take someone through this 5-phase system if they've torn their ACL or they sprained their MCL. It will just take slightly longer. But those are the only 2 injuries that apply to that. Again, the difference is simply that earlier phases will last longer and progressions are more conservative, again due to surgery. For chronic knee pain, however, diagnosis rarely changes the rehab process. And the reasoning behind this, I use something called Occam's razor. Now, essentially, Occam's razor outlines that all things being equal, the simplest solution tends to be the best one. And so if we relate this back to diagnosis, people are trying to overcomplicate this with different types of diagnoses at the knee. Realistically, break it down into physical, lifestyle. Are they strong? Are they mobile? Are they confident? Are they sleeping well? Are they eating well? You can break this down to very simple questions. You do not need to overcomplicate it. And a lot of the time, I feel diagnosis is almost scapegoating the issue. The next thing I want to cover is systems versus emotions. So to do that, we need to define what a system is. So a system is a repeatable process that takes an input, transforms it, and produces a reliable output. So an example of this on a macro level, so on a larger scale, in terms of rehab, is the input is the initial assessment, the process is the rehab program, and then the output is you return back to the sport or activity. Another example at a micro level, the input is a client completing a weekly check-in, the process is I review the weekly check-in, and the output is I adjust the program accordingly based off what I've seen. The most important point here, systems allow us to get reliable outputs or output. Emotions. So emotions are a normal part of being human, and you have plenty of negative and positive emotions during knee rehab when things are going well and when things are not going so well. As I mentioned previously, you want to accept them, but do not react emotionally. Some examples here of emotional reactions in knee rehab. My knee feels better, so I'm going to go for a run. This word feels is key. It's not certain at all. The second one, I feel sad today, so I'm not going to do my knee rehab. Again, feel. My pain score is higher today than normal. Rehab isn't working. So the emotional reaction here is looking at knee rehab over a day instead of weeks or months. So it's short-term versus long-term thinking, but it's emotional reaction again. And if we look at example of system-based reactions, my knee is stronger, more mobile, more confident, less painful based on the testing we completed. Therefore, I'm safe to start running under the recommended volume/intensity. Another one, my pain score is higher today than normal. Why is this? What would Fred's system indicate? So I've already answered that one. It's probably because pain is incredibly complex and it varies day to day and week to week. Look at it over the long term. The point I'm trying to make here is effective rehab is only based on emotions. This is why you go round in cycles with your knee pain and you have no clarity and no plan to follow. When you say feel, it creates an air of uncertainty. You need criteria to know that you're ready to go back to sport or the activity. You need to know. It's not feel. And this is where I feel a lot of people go wrong with knee rehab. I'll give you a great simple analogy to explain this. If you're getting a builder to build your house and you ask the builder, how strong is this house? How strong are the foundations? Are the foundations going to be strong enough? You don't want the builder to say, I feel or I think that the foundations are going to be strong enough. You want the builder to say, these foundations are strong enough, or I know these foundations are strong enough because of X, Y, Z. You want certainty, which is what ineffective rehab doesn't give you. So some examples of ineffective rehab. Hands-on treatment to start with. So massage, taping, acupuncture, joint cracking, and mobilizations. Then we also have traditional physio, which is usually 3 exercises on a piece of paper, no system or framework to follow, no objective testing, and no accurate recovery time frame. There's 2 reasons these approaches don't work. The first one is that they don't fix the things that matter, which is strength, mobility, speed, confidence, beliefs around your injury and pain, and your lifestyle. And the second thing, which is what I mentioned with systems and emotions, is these things, hands-on treatment and traditional physio, are purely emotional. Feels better is not a good metric to have when you're paying someone a lot of money for your rehab or going to get a massage. It's complete guesswork. They're not following a system here. It's all based off feeling. And again, I'm not saying emotions are a bad thing, and they are important to measure some aspects of those in rehab. For example, how are you feeling in terms of confidence? How's your pain feeling? But it should not be the sole thing that you're measuring. You need to objectively measure other things like strength, mobility, speed to have a more complete framework and make sure that you are ready to hit the ground running. So now we move on to my knee rehab system. And as I mentioned, this is a 5-phase system. We have phase 1, which is called protect and prep. We have phase 2, which is build a base. Phase 3, strength and power. Phase 4, dynamic control. And phase 5, sport ready. So the first thing we need to do before we go into phase 1 is do some testing. We need to test how your body moves as a whole, so the kinetic chain, and then how your knee moves and how strong your knee is. So what I do with every client is this general movement assessment. So I'm going to bring the YouTube video up here for us. So in this assessment, I just want, and I'm going to turn the volume off, and I'm just going to quickly run through what the exercises are. You can watch this through in your own time. You'll have access to it. But essentially, it's running through all these particular things. And these are just the camera angles that I want clients to film them at. So I'll run through them on here. Just make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So to start with, we've got a toe touch in a few different angles. So front on, side on, and then from behind. Then we have a squat. Again, a few different angles. Then we have a side bend on each side from front and back. Then we have some rotations. Then we have some reaches overhead. Again, from a few different angles. Then we have some knee rocks. So rocking back and forward, again on both sides, a few different angles. Again, you can go through this all in your own time, very easily. And the last little position is a shin box position. So looking at your hip mobility. So again, doing this on both sides, seeing the position of your hips and your torso. So with all of these things, to summarize, what I'm looking for is how your body's moving as a whole. So the toe touch, for example, I'm not looking at your range of motion. The squat, I'm not looking at your range of motion. The side bend, I'm not looking at your range of motion. All these, I'm not looking at the range of motion. I'm looking at what structures are you using to get there. And what I mean by that very quickly is on the toe touch, if I pause there, what structures am I using to get into this bottom position? Am I bending mostly through my spine? Am I using my hips? What's happening at my hamstrings? Another example might be with this side bend. This is a nice one. When I'm bending down to my side, Again, is all the movement coming through my spine? Is some coming through my hips? Are my heels lifting off? This gives me clues to then how their whole body is moving as one. Now the problem is here, I cannot have a general thing here for everyone because everyone is different in terms of how they move. But that gives you an idea of what I go through. So that gives me an idea of how someone's moving in their whole body. The thing that is more applicable and that you can implement straight away is specific knee range of motion and strength testing. So what I'll do here is I'll first look at knee flexion. All knee flexion is just bending the knee. So we can have a quick look at this video, but all it is usually in this position, I'm just seeing how far they can bend the knee like this and then measuring the range of motion on both sides. In terms of knee extension, so straightening the knee, I've already got that from the general movement assessment. Then we'll have a look at some strength testing. So I'll have a look at a leg extension isometric, and you're going to build to a max weight for a 10-second hold on each side. So if we have a look at this one, this is something that you can do very, very easily. So you go onto a leg extension machine, you're on a single leg, you've got your knee bent to around 60 degrees, and you're going to build to a weight that you can hold this position for 10 seconds. And then you're going to record it on each side and compare them, making sure, again, your pain score isn't going above a 0 to 3 out of 10. This is primarily testing the quad strength, injured versus non-injured side. So that's the first strength test, if you like. Second one is a foam roller bridge. So this is testing your hamstring and calf capacity. So you set up in this position with a gentle tuck of your pelvis like this. Gentle tuck of my pelvis, my hips are about a centimetre off the floor. And then I'm keeping my heels nice and high, and I'm simply holding this position until I can't hold it anymore. And then I'm recording that number, or you're recording that number. And the last little one is a single leg wall sit to have a look at a few different muscles around the knee. So this is actually a lot of muscles working together to hold this position. So what I would do is I just go as low as you can on the wall while being comfortable. So while keeping that pain score within 0 to 3 out of 10. So for some people, you'll be able to get down here and hold this position. For others, if your knee pain is quite irritable, you want to start higher up here. And again, on each leg, you're just going to hold it for as long as you can until failure. So until you can't physically hold it any longer. Again, record that, compare it side to side. Then immediately after testing, what I will get someone to do is to answer these questions. So, how much pain did you feel in your knee during the session? Again, using this 0 to 10 scale. How much swelling around the knee? How confident are you in the knee? And then the next morning, again, similar sort of questions. So you can see how all of this is actually incredibly simple, but it's structured, and we can track a lot of numbers here. Obviously, the general movement assessment is more subjective because it's how someone's moving, just based off a camera. But in terms of the range of motion and strength and the pain and tissue response, so we actually have some numbers here to note down, compare, and then retest after we go through phase 1, which is what we're going to get into now. So phase 1 of knee rehab. This is an example of a client I've worked with. So again, this is not gospel. This is not the only structure that I use with clients, but it's the structure I use with a lot of clients. Okay. So 4 main sessions per week, 45 to 60 minutes each, and then some daily mobility, which takes people 5 minutes to do. So actually, if you look at that time-wise per week, it's nothing crazy, especially if you wanted to get back to sport. The first session has a higher focus on the knee. So that's what local means, the local area. And ideally we do this on Monday and then Thursday. And this is the session. So we'd start with some prep and motor control. So it's just mobility and motor control, 5 minutes on a bike to warm up, then a quad stretch, a few sets, hamstring floss, a few sets, some quadruped rock backs, which is just bending the knee and sinking into a deep bottom position. Again, all the exercise demos, videos are all attached here, but they're the least important thing here. The main thing here is that you can see what the framework is like. But yeah, some quad stretching, hamstring strength stretching, bending the knee, rotating the shin bone. Then we go into some strength work. Nothing complex. We have a hamstring bridge, 3 sets of 45 to 60 seconds at RPE8. All RPE means is rate of perceived exertion, again using a 0 to 10 scale. So 0 is not working hard and 10 is working extremely hard. So if you take that into lifting weights or holding a position, if you were at RP8, you would only be able to do 2 more reps, or in the case of a hold, only hold it for a few more seconds. So this is working pretty hard. So yeah, hamstring bridge, a leg extension isometric, and then a straight knee calf raise, and then a cable abduction and adduction for the hip. So what you'll notice is, if I just open this up, for the hamstring bridge, it's just, again, a variation of the foam roller bridge, just a little bit easier to work on the hamstrings and calves, but it's just holding one position. A leg extension iso is the exercise that you were testing in the strength. So the stuff around the knee initially is isometric, so it's just holding one position, and then other muscles around the knee, we will train them actively because you can still get stronger here, like a calf raise and cable work here for the hips without irritating the knee. So we can build up other areas in the kinetic chain, so it improves how you're moving overall. Then you complete this feedback section. How sore was your knee during the session? Morning stiffness, next day pain, general comments. And then you just, complete that Monday, complete it Thursday. Pretty easy. And again, when I work with clients, I just ask for a few videos of each of these. Then we have session 2, which is a global approach. So this is looking at how the lower body and the whole body is moving together. Tuesday and Friday. So 5 minutes on the bike again, easy pace. Then into the same prep and motor control sequence. So quad stretch, a hamstring floss, quadruped rock backs, tibial rotation, and the strength is what's different. So we've got a single leg RDL, Romanian deadlift on a Smith machine. So this is looking to build strength capacity in the glutes and hamstrings without irritating the knee. So something similar to this. So again, we're building up other areas of strength while we're only loading the knee very lightly to start with. So we're not going to irritate it. Again, we've got more stuff for the glutes and hamstrings, Smith machine glute bridge or hip thrust, whatever you want to call it. And again, very, very similar here, using something like this to start off with. Very simple, very easy to overload, very hard to get wrong. And then the last little thing is just a tibialis raise, which I don't use that often, but this is more just to get some blood flow into the shins and improve a bit of strength in that range. So this will be a slightly shorter session, but again, for most people, it's going to take between 45 to 60 minutes. Again, same feedback here. So we're tracking all these things between sessions as well. You can track these things. They're really useful. And it gives you some idea here. So morning stiffness. These are kind of the things we're aiming for here. 10 to 15 minutes is fine. Reduce load if above 15 minutes. Next day pain. How sore was it 24 hours later? Aim for 1 to 2 out of 10, no more than that. And then just some general comments about how you're feeling. Then we have daily mobility for phase 1. So we have some pelvic tilts with breathing. We have some scissor slides and we have some 90-90 knee rolls. So what you'll notice with a lot of these is these are now tying into what I was talking about with what could be causing knee pain in the first place. So this is looking at the rest of the body. So with the pelvic tilts and breathing, we're looking at improving expansion and compression of the rib cage and getting your pelvis moving, which again isn't directly related to knee pain, but it will help when you start to run, jump, change direction again with just generally how you're moving, get you moving a lot better. So pretty simple. Scissor slides and knee rolls are pretty similar. Didn't mean to copy that. Again, this is just extra little bits of hip mobility. So here we're just getting me to, with the scissor slide, shift my hip over and back. Again, not directly related to the knee, but will help with overall movement quality and will help you in the future with improving performance and reducing injury risk. So what I get someone to do 99.9% of the time is we jump into the testing, note that down, then we do phase 1. And most people would stay in phase 1 for between 3 to 4 weeks. Then what we do to make sure that they're ready to progress on to phase 2? Well, we'd retest. So again, we do the same general movement assessment that we did before phase 1, all the same movements. Then we do the range of motion and the strength testing again. And then the pain and tissue response again after testing. Now this brings us on to our first set of criteria. So this is what most people are missing again with knee rehab and fixing knee pain. In order to progress from phase 1 to phase 2A, so for knee pain, just to clarify, I split phase 2 up into 2 sub-phases, just because it needs a slightly slower progression generally than other joints in the body. So this is the criteria that we need to hit. So I break it down into pain and tissue response, range of motion, strength, movement control, confidence and consistency. And then down this column, we've got the domain. And then we've got the target, or the threshold, if you'd like, that we need to hit before progressing into phase 2A. So for example, pain response, equal to or less than 2 out of 10 pain during load, so during rehab and none 24 hours later. I'm not going to bore you with this, but it's all the stuff you need. Swelling, stiffness / effusion, consistency. And then if you look at all the things here, it's all stuff we're improving and measuring during rehab. So knee extension, knee flexion, tibial rotation. The strength stuff is all the tests we've done. The single leg stand is slightly different, but I'll be able to assess that subjectively. So some of these again are subjective, like the tibial rotation. That's just me just looking at clients, but a lot of them are objective. So knee flexion, we can measure that in degrees. This is fairly objective because it's on a scale. And then these are all objective here as well. So with the strength stuff, what this means, LSI, is essentially symmetry. So for example, with the quads on the leg extension isometric, we're looking to get up to the injured side should be 70% as strong as the uninjured side, with pain equal to or less than 2 out of 10, and the same here on the single leg wall sit. For the foam roller bridge, we're just looking for a hold equal to or above 30 seconds pain-free. So obviously those three are objective, that's subjective. But yeah, that's what LSI means. It's basically just symmetry between uninjured side and injured side. Again, movement control here is very subjective. So this will be me looking at people. Confidence and consistency, this is pretty objective. So again, how confident are you with your movement? We're looking to get up to equal to above a 7 out of 10. And then consistency equal to or above 90% pain-free sessions. So then we move on to phase 2A, which is the same weekly framework as phase 1. So we've got 4 main sessions per week, same amount of time and same time for daily mobility. The sessions are just slightly different. So in the prep and motor control section, essentially all we're doing is increasing the amount of knee bend and challenging the knee in slightly deeper ranges of motion. Very simple. I haven't got some video demos for a few of these, but again, you can look them up very easy on YouTube. But I have them for like 99.9% of them. Because obviously usually in the program, I just have videos inside my app. So I had to try to find some and I couldn't find some on YouTube. So come with a bit of slack there. The main thing that's different is the strength stuff. So foam roller bridge, so similar to a hamstring bridge, just getting a bit more difficult. But then we introduced the slouching split squat. So we're starting to bend the knee more. I'll just show you quickly what a slouching split squat looks like. It's just this. So bending the knee, teaching it how to push off the floor, teaching your body how to push off the floor, etc., etc. And then we still have a leg extension iso, and we still have the calf raise and the cable abduction and adduction. So the only thing we're doing is just introducing that split squat, getting the knee to bend more. Same thing with feedback. Then we have session 2, global, Tuesday and Friday. Again, this is progressed on in the prep and motor control section, and the strength is just slightly progressed on again. So we've progressed on the RDL and the Smith machine to a kickstand hinge with a reach. And then instead of a double leg glute bridge, it's just a single leg glute bridge in a Smith machine. So to target each side a bit more independently. And then tibialis raises again. So just progressing on slightly, making it a bit more tricky. This is what rehab should look like a lot of the time. The base structure should be very similar. It's just a few exercises that are being tweaked phase by phase to make it more difficult and to challenge the tissues around the knee and your whole body more and more. Again, you complete the feedback, And the daily mobility again is slightly different here. So I've just added in some leg tracing, which is just a slightly more advanced hip mobility exercise. Then we'd retest. So again, I'm repeating myself a lot here, but this is rehab. It can be quite boring. General movement assessment, all those. And then we'd go into knee range of motion and strength. So again, knee flexion. And now we'd introduce a few more things here. So we've introduced the speed element that we're going to test. We're going to test some plyometrics. So an A march, which isn't a plyometric, but it's teaching a body to start to train speed qualities. So an A march, if you don't know, it's just like this. So we're just seeing if your knee can handle these sorts of positions and you're well coordinated in that position. And then some pogo pops, which is essentially just very, very tiny hops like this. Now, although we haven't done any of this work in phase 2A, you will be strong and confident and mobile enough to handle it because it's very, very minimal load in terms of plyometrics. So again, I'm just making sure you can do that. Then it's all the same strength stuff here. The only addition is a bent knee Copenhagen plank for the adductors, so the groin muscles. And all we're doing with this one again is we're just holding this position until failure on each side in this position on a bench. Pain and tissue response, again, track and measure those. And then we have, there we go, phase 2A to phase 2B criteria. Again, all the same things here: pain and tissue response, range of motion, strength, plyometrics. This is a new one that we've added in. And yeah, this is the thing we're looking to tick off. And then confidence and consistency. Then phase 2B. Again, very, very similar here. The only thing we're adding in is some plyometrics. So prep modes control, wall pogo and pogo pops. So pogo pops are just the little hops. A wall pogo is just about 50% of your body weight in this position, and we start to train some speed qualities like that. So we're not jumping and bounding and sprinting straight away, we're gradually building up. Strength stuff again is just progressing on slightly. So instead of a double leg foam roller bridge, it's single leg, a short split squat with some dumbbells, leg extension iso. And then here we've just got a bit more variation. So on a Monday it'd be a straight knee calf raise. On Thursday it would be an eccentric 2 up 1 down calf raise. Again, a bit more variation on these last bit of accessories. On Monday it'd be a straight leg Copenhagen. On Thursday it'd be a cable abduction with a torso lean to work on hip strength. Then feedback, complete that. Session 2 global, Tuesday and Friday. Prep mode controls the same, just progressing on. And then we just have a bit more variation in terms of what we're doing here. So kickstand hinge with the barbell, again overloading the kickstand hinge. If you don't know what a kickstand hinge looks like, it looks a little bit like a staggered stance RDL, but just slightly different cues, and yeah, it's a slightly different stimulus on that. Video explains it on there. And then the Smith machine, single leg glute bridge again, just decreasing the reps, going a bit heavier. And then on Tuesday, squatted calf raise, and on Friday, inversion and eversion lifts, just to get a nice foot pump and ankle pump. Feedback, and then daily mobility, again, just progressing. This is all, I know, very, very boring, very consistent, but yeah, this is a nice program for you to follow. Then daily mobility, again, progressing on. Just to mention again, for which I haven't mentioned, in phase 2A is usually a little bit shorter, so 2-3 weeks. And then phase 2B, again, most people spend 2 to 3 weeks in that. And then what we're going to do afterwards, you guessed it, retest. Same general movement assessment. And then knee range of motion and strength again. Range of motion, just progressing on with the plyometrics. So now we're looking at a double leg pogo, which is a little bit higher than a pogo pop. So just more speed, more hang time, more force going through the knee, and then a step off to stick. So again, this is a bit more load going through the knee and understanding how it absorbs force off a box. And then all the strength stuff is exactly the same. We're just looking at a straight leg Copenhagen here instead of a bent knee one. Pain and tissue response, exactly the same, measuring that. And then we're into phase 3. So again, most people with phase 1, usually 3 to 4 weeks. Phase 2A, 2 to 3 weeks. Phase 2B, 2 to 3 weeks. And then into phase 3. Once again, once you meet all these criteria. So phase 2B to phase 3 criteria. Again, I'm not going to bore you. You can go through them in your own time. Pain and tissue response, range of motion, strength. Again, LSI means symmetry. So we're looking at 85% symmetry comparing uninjured to injured side. Plyometrics, confidence and consistency. Again, confidence under load. 10 is very, very confident. 0 is no confident. And then consistency, yeah, we're looking at pain-free weeks, pain-free sessions equal to above 90%. Then we go into phase 3. So phase 3, again, very, very similar layout. 4 main sessions, 5 minutes of daily mobility. Again, just progressing on in each of these sections, making them slightly more difficult. The only difference here is now what we have in phase 3 is we have specific days for strength and plyometrics. So on Monday and Thursday, you will do prep and motor control, then you will do strength. Again, all of this is progressing on, becoming more challenging, and we have more variation here again. So what I mean by both of these is on Monday, you will do a Bulgarian split squat, and then on Thursday, you will do a leg extension. So you won't do both, it will just be alternating. Same thing here with F, different isometric. Same thing here with G, and same thing here with H. So you're not doing both of these, you're just alternating Monday and then Thursday. Again, feedback to answer. And then session 2 is plyometrics. So now we have a sole session on plyometrics to work on speed qualities, change direction, jumping, bounding. So prep and motor control. And then we're into quite a few plyometrics. Double leg pogo, lateral bound to stick, hop plus stick, single leg pogo circuit. So now we have a much bigger variety of plyometrics, changing direction, some lateral stuff here, loads of different really good bits. This is all kind of the juicy stuff, the underrated stuff that actually gets you back to sport and absorbing and creating a lot of force. Again, you can go through those all in your own time. Then we just have one strength exercise. So again, this is not both of these, just one strength on the back of this plyometric bit session. So Tuesday, kickstand hinge with a barbell, only 2 sets of 5. And then on Friday, you will do a Smith machine single leg glute bridge. Feedback again, answer that, track that, improve that. And then daily mobility, again, this is all progressing on. So you'll notice compared to phase 1 now, we're doing stuff like this, where it's a lot more functional, so to speak. You're on your feet. We're getting everything integrated and the whole body moving together with the hip and the knee. Again, you guessed it, retest. So we have a look at general movement again. Then we have a look at your knee, range of motion, strength, speed. So range of motion, knee flexion, plyometrics, more advanced again. And these obviously all tie into the criteria below. Strength, same strength things here. The only thing I've added in here is a straight knee calf raise and a straight leg Copenhagen. Pain and tissue response, again, answer all those. And then we're into phase 3 and phase 4 criteria. All very self-explanatory. Again, LSI is symmetry. That's what we're looking for now. So much higher symmetry between uninjured and injured side. There's a few subjective bits here. So like split squat, equal range and load, that's subjective, but we have a good mix there. And then again, to finish off, we have confidence and consistency. Confidence and load, confidence and decel, consistency. Then we move into phase 4. Again, same structure as phase 3, very, very similar, just progressing on. People spend about 3 to 4 weeks again in phase 3, and they'll go into phase 4. I will go through phase 4 very, very quickly. Very, very similar, a lot more variation, so you just alternate between particular exercises. A plyometric session is the same, apart from the strength accessory work. And, oh, sorry, there's a bit more variation in the plyometric stuff here again. So within the plyos now, you will do different plyos on each day. So on Tuesday, you'll do the step down plus vertical jump. On Friday, you won't do both. You will just do the XL and decel. Same with a lot of these. So just to make that clear, you're not doing both, you're just alternating. Then we have the daily mobility. Again, very, very similar. And then we retest before going into phase 5. So we have a look at all those movements again, how the body's moving as a whole, and then specifically knee range of motion, strength, range of motion, plyometrics. Again, these are all getting more advanced. We're now measuring things like vertical jumps, way more force going through the knee to make sure they're ready for sport, things like this, measuring jump height, etc., etc. measuring the ability to accelerate and decelerate, so things like this, or accelerating over 8 to 10 meters, and then seeing how well the knee can absorb force and decelerate. A lot of nice things, tuck jumps, all sorts. Then we go on to strength. Now, the main thing that's changing here is obviously none of these are isometrics. They're all just heavy active movements. So leg extension, 3 rep max, single leg glute bridge, 3 rep max, hamstring curl, 3 rep max. All 3 rep max means is the max amount of weight you can do for 3 repetitions. So if I put a gun to your head, you couldn't do 4. So for example, if we just use the single leg hamstring curl on this machine, build up to the max weight you could do for 3 reps on this. And yeah, you do the same for all the others. The only one that isn't that is the straight leg Copenhagen, which is just an isometric. Then again, pain and tissue response, fill that out. And then we got phase 4 to phase 5 criteria. Again, all very similar. Tests are just slightly changing, but all the targets, everything is similar, just progressing. Some of these are objective, some of them aren't. So for example, a lot of the plyometric stuff is subjective. It's me looking at how people are moving, how they're landing, how confident they are. But obviously you can measure the pain scores there. And then confidence and consistency again. And then into phase 5. Now for phase 5, what I've done is I've given you an example, phase 5 for a footballer. Now the reason I've done this is because it probably gives you the best idea of someone returning to semi-professional football, which is essentially what I've taken it from, a client I was working with who's a semi-professional footballer. But obviously this can apply to any other sport. It would just be specific to that sport. So again, this is not for, a CrossFitter, a weightlifter, a rugby player. This is for a footballer, but you can take the same principles and apply it into your sport, okay? Because it would take me over 30 hours to go through every single sport and go through phase 5. So in phase 5, the structure changes slightly and we go down to 3 days of mobility, plyometrics, sport and strength stuff. And if you look at day 1 for a footballer, we now have a specific focus for each day. So in the case of a footballer, day 1, the focus is on linear speed and deceleration control. And typically for this person, this would be, you can do this as one session, but because he was a semi-pro footballer and he had time, we split this into 2 sessions throughout the day. They weren't massively long sessions, but just to recover enough between them to get the most out of each one. So in the morning, prep and motor control, 3 exercises, to a little bit of plyometrics, and then into some sport integration. So things that are specific to football, qualities that are specific to football that he's going to need. So sprinting and then accelerating, decelerating and re-accelerating. I haven't got any video demos for these because it's not relevant to this phase 5, and it's not relevant to help you specifically here because phase 5 is incredibly specific to the person, even more so than the other phases. So, I mean, you can look up all these exercises on YouTube. It will give you pretty accurate video demos. But yeah, that's why I haven't included them specifically on here. So he would do that in the morning. And then in PM, so in the afternoon, he would do 3 really simple strength exercises. You'll notice the volume here is way lower. There's only 2 sets on each of these because of the increased volume of the sport stuff, and the sprints and all this will tire you out a lot more as a footballer. Then day 2, so you usually have a rest, and then day 2 would be Wednesday, AM again, prep and motor control, into some plyometric prep, and then sport integration. So this is very much football based. A 10 meter shuffle, some cone cuts with the ball, and then 10 ball passes, and then 30-second jog recovery, which is probably what you're going to get in a game, even maybe a bit less. Then rest, afternoon, 2 really simple strength exercises, just to maintain and develop a little bit of strength in weak areas. This is now starting to replicate more what a footballer would look like in season, where they would have a lot less time for strength work and they'd just be trying to maintain some plyometric work while they're obviously doing a lot of training, a lot of on-field stuff and playing a lot of matches. Then day 3, Friday ideally, the focus reactive endurance and match simulation. Simulation, prep and motor control in the morning, plyometrics, sport integration. Again, more and more specific stuff to football, 6 to 8 rounds of a reactive circuit at 70 to 8% of max effort, 15 meter sprint into 90-degree COD, which is change direction, into a 15 meter sprint, pass plus receive, back pedal 10 meters, 6 to 8 rounds. Again, preparing him specifically for the demands of football at game intensity, game volume, and then PM in the afternoon, a little bit of strength work. Again, nothing too crazy, a bit of calf work, a bit of quad work, or another accessory that needs attacking, depending on the person. So that would be it. And then potentially with this as well, what we did with him actually is we start to introduce gradually some training with the rest of his team and matches as well. And then we gradually decrease the amount of rehab days here. So we go from 3 down to 2, and then you keep it at 2, just with a lower volume and intensity of maintenance for the rehab stuff, while increasing the volume of training and matches. And obviously with the training and matches, again, with the training, it would be gradually reintroduced. So he might start with once a week, then twice a week. And with the matches, he might come off the bench initially for 5-10 minutes, and then it would be built up, and then he would slowly maybe go into the starting 11. So again, it's all gradual, progressive. So he has his body, his knee has time to recover and get used to the new stimulus. Then we have phase 5 to return support criteria for a footballer, as the example. So same domains: pain and tissue response, strength, load tolerance, plyometrics and sport performance, all jumping, banning, change direction. Again, here you will struggle to measure this, but I'm essentially just measuring this based off a few apps I use and my just coaching eye. And then we've got some specific stuff to football here again. And then we've got confidence and autonomy. So confidence, obviously we want it to be very, very high. The athlete is completing all rehab sessions independently, and they're completing all sessions pain-free, at least 90% or more than the time, over a 3 to 6 week period. So timeframes. How long do I work with most knee pain clients for? Well, usually it's between 3 to 6 months. And this is because if you've been dealing with chronic knee pain for a long period of time, it's going to take at least 3 months to see significant changes in all the things I mentioned. And as you can see from watching this video, if you've watched it this far, it's not a simple thing. It's simple in the fact that you just follow a system and a framework, but there's a lot of different things to measure and a lot of ups and downs potentially. So yeah, most people 3 to 6 months. And as I said, the only caveat to this is when someone has ACL surgery and it's longer just because of the healing time and the surgery process. So that's usually 8 to 12 months to return to sport. Just to go over the system process simplified, we test, we go into phase whatever, we retest. Do you meet the criteria? Yes. If so, you go into the next phase. If you don't meet the criteria, we just keep going round and round that phase. So that is something important to mention. If you're in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, and you're not meeting the criteria to progress on, don't progress on. Just keep in that phase for a bit longer. Keep in that phase for another 2-3 weeks and then retest. So what to do next? You now understand more than knee rehab, more about knee rehab than 99% of people who will ever watch this video. But knowledge alone won't fix anything. So what you want to do, start today. Don't be lazy. Don't put it off. Go do phase 1. Do the testing. Do the testing, then do phase 1. That's what I meant by that. Do your first session. Don't wait until you feel ready. Action creates momentum. So yeah, do your testing, see where you're at, measure all that. Go do phase 1. Stick to the system. This is probably the most important part. The people who get life-changing results are the ones who don't jump between exercises, don't chase quick fixes, and don't train randomly. You also want to measure everything. So the testing isn't optional. It's how you create certainty, confidence, and clarity. When the numbers go up, your pain goes down, very simply. Move through the phases with intent. So again, not emotionally, not because your pain fluctuated in one day, but because the objective criteria tell you that you are ready to move on. If you want help with this, if you want guidance from someone who's coached hundreds of athletes back from knee pain, and you don't want to waste another 6 to 12 months guessing with this framework, you can work with me using the link down below. I really hope you enjoyed that video. Take care. I will see you in the next one.